considerable amount of stress at that point in time. The rationale for the government intervention was extremely clear. There were a large number of projects which had progressed but had not reached the finish line. There were a large number of home buyers whose delight had turned into distress as their homes were not completed. They were going through that classic tragedy of paying rent as well as EMIs on their this. And at the same time, the environment in 2019 was such that the traditional allocators of funds for completing housing projects, the NBFCs, were going through a period of stress as well. It is at that point in time that the government stepped in, announced almost $1.5 billion fund. We are currently almost $2 billion to complete stressed projects. We've come a long way since then. In about 2 years, we've become a fully functional initiative, and I'll take you through to the bottom line at the end. But let me just very quickly tell you what we are doing differently. So for the first time, a fund has come along that does not focus on account behavior, but rather on site activity. It focuses on project construction, not on repayment to start with. So that's very different from any other funding that has happened in the past. For the first time, we have very loudly proclaimed, and all our actions are to protect the home buyer and not the promoter. So our key stakeholder here, and that is linked to our ESG initiative, is that the home buyer is important. The home buyer needs to be rescued. It is not the quality of the promoter. It is not the track record of the promoter that is important to us. For the first time, again, a fund has emphasized on disbursements being linked entirely to construction, on having people feet on the ground, a PMC company at the site, which will actually give us daily reports on site activity, where funding will be in the form of reimbursements and not tranches or installments. As a result, what we've got to the table, and we've created, what we've got to the table is credibility. What we've got to the table is construction focus, along with something else that we keep harping about, that we come in with the entire amount that is required to complete the construction. So unlike what has happened in the past, again, this fund acts as a catalyst. Our presence helps complete construction. Our presence helps get new collections. Our presence helps getting collections from existing home buyers, because suddenly they feel that there's a credible funding partner involved, and our presence leads to increased sales. So that's that's about it about the fund specifically. But I want to go on to mention that this is for the first time a domestic fund has come in with an ESG emphasis, right? And what is very different is, and this is what I link to whether ESG is a buzzword for us or not, is that this is a manager-driven initiative. This is not an investor-imposed condition. Typically, ESG standards are insisted upon by the investors and are followed by the manager. In this case, our ESG policy is actually a board-approved policy. It is interwoven into our entire investment process. We do an initial due diligence, we do an external due diligence, we have an EHS plan in place, and our asset management focuses also on the ESG bit. So we have a separate team that specifically looks at ESG DD, ESG compliance, and so on. Within ESG, I've already mentioned that to us, a key stakeholder is the home buyer. We look at number of distressed sellers in the project. We are communicating and helping the home buyer, not by giving him a running commentary, right? Lots of words are poor solace when action is what the home buyer is looking for. And so we choose to focus on not interactions with the home buyer, but interactions with the experts to help the home buyer. So we choose to focus on how construction can progress, how we can get the various approvals that are required so that we can start disbursements. And in that way, we strive to act in the best interest of our key stakeholder, which is the home buyer. And I can say this over and over again. During our ESG due diligence, right, there is an emphasis on a couple of things, all of which flows from our board ESG policy, which is board approved. Like I said, This policy is based on, inspired by IFC performance standards, EHS guidelines of World Bank, and it pledges adherence to national regulatory standards. We would do that after all. We are a fund sponsored by the Government of India, managed by SBI Cap Ventures, which is a step-down subsidiary of the State Bank of India. So during the ESG process, we look at maybe 3-4 buckets when it comes to diligence. And I mentioned that we do a two-stage diligence process, an initial diligence and then an exhaustive diligence, which is done by external experts. So when it comes to governance, in that external due diligence, we've covered even forensic due diligence in addition to the usual corporate legal diligence that we do, compliance with company law, etc. So all those governance standards are being incorporated within our diligence itself. But when we do ESG specifically, we are looking at things like, what are the governance norms that are very important for us as an investor, right? I think Anjuman mentioned, any EHS initiative would be successful if it is backed by successful investors, where it's not a grant, but an investor is also getting a return on their investment. So in our first stage in the ESG, we look at what are the regulatory approvals applicable in real estate, license, RERA, building plans, height approvals, CAR policy, contractors all risk policy, and so on. Then we look at, from an environmental point of view, what are the various approvals that should have been there, should be there? What is the validity of the environmental clearance? What is the built-up area mentioned there versus the built-up area mentioned in the approved plans? Have 6 monthly filings or the filings that are required under the Act been done in the past? Is there an issue with groundwater extraction? Do approvals need to be taken? Is there a requirement for a forest NOC, or are there parts of the project which fall within ecologically sensitive zones? All this analysis occurs as part of our environmental bit in ESG. But more than that, when it comes to stakeholders, if after home buyers, along with home buyers, we are also concerned with the workers at our site, with the laborers at the site, right? So we always, in all our projects, we insist on the appointment of a safety officer. We insist on Minimum Wages Act as a covenant to be followed throughout the life cycle of our investment. We check for applicability of EPF and ESI, and if the company has not adhered to it, we require that to be done. We ensure that there is no child labor at the site. We, especially in the COVID environment that we lived through in the first 2 years of our existence, we are looking at living conditions, shelter conditions, bathrooms, living quarters, even creche facilities. So, for example, creche facilities are required at all our projects where there are more than, I think about 10 children involved. So if there are 10 or more children there at the site, we insist on, some kind of creche facilities at least. And finally, we look at, environment, investment, environment, labor, and finally, we look at the legal requirements which are there for, applicable to such projects. We were, in a manner of speaking, surprised by the complete lack of governance standards in most of the companies that have approached us. And we can say with pride that all these companies are now either compliant or are significantly on their way to compliance with all the legal requirements. So laws like Building and Other Construction Workers Act, Interstate Migrants Act, Contract Labor Act, all the kinds of returns that need to be filed with the Act are part of either the CPs or the CSS or the covenants in our funding. So we ensure that our companies are compliant with this, right? All that said and done, where are we now? We have given approval to about 108 projects. We hope to complete about 63,000 homes in that process. We've given initial approval. So that was final approval. We've given initial approval to about 143 additional projects where we hope to complete 84,000 homes. Between them, we'll complete about 1,48,000 homes. And those are targets. What we've actually done so far in the last 2 years is we've delivered about 2,700 homes, possession handed over. There are another 6,000 homes where an OC has been applied for. And this audience understands better than most other people. That means that all entire work that is required for completion of the project is done. So that between that we have covered about 8,700 homes. In fact, we've estimated that we are on a run rate to complete about 10,000 homes every year. So that's the story of SWAMIH. We have integrated and interwoven the ESG diligence process and EHS standards into our investment process. And we can say with some satisfaction that it has not been a load on the process. It has helped us achieve the results we've done so.